Gavin nearly dropped his coffee mug when Aa's scream pierced the quiet of the early morning. The sound was sharp, panicked, and unlike anything he'd ever heard from her before. His heart leapt into his throat as he bolted toward the hallway, his mind racing with worst-case scenarios. He could hear her small feet stumbling and sliding against the wooden floor, each step erratic and desperate. When he reached her, Aa was clinging to the wall with one hand, reaching out for him with the other. Her face was flushed red, her eyes wide with fear, and her mouth moved as if she were trying to speak, but the words that came out were strange, slurred, and broken. "Daddy," she cried, her voice trembling and unfamiliar. Gavin's pulse thundered in his ears like a war drum as he rushed to her side. Just as he got there, her legs buckled beneath her, and she collapsed into his arms. She felt impossibly light, fragile, as though all the energy had been drained from her tiny body. Her breathing was rapid, shallow, like she'd just sprinted a marathon, and her unfocused gaze darted around the room without settling on anything. "Isabel!" Gavin shouted, his voice cracking under the weight of panic. Isabel burst from the kitchen, still clutching a dish towel. When she saw Aa limp in Gavin's arms, her face went ghostly pale. "What's going on?" she whispered, her voice shaking so badly it barely sounded like her own. Aa's tiny hands clung weakly to Gavin's shirt, but her head lolled to the side, too heavy for her to hold up. "Mommy, everything's spinning," she mumbled, her words slow and distorted. She looked at Isabel with confusion, as if she didn't recognize her own mother. Isabel's heart shattered. This wasn't their vibrant, giggling little girl, the one who twirled through the house pretending to be a fairy princess or laughed uncontrollably during tickle fights. This was someone else entirely, a frail, unsteady version of their daughter, robbed of her spark. "We're going to the hospital now," Gavin said, his voice tight with fear. He cradled Aa close as Isabel fumbled for the car keys, her hands trembling so violently it took 3 tries to unlock the door. The drive to the hospital passed in a blur. Aa sat slumped in her car seat, her head lolling to one side, her eyes fluttering open and closed as though she were trapped in some terrible dream. Isabel twisted in her seat repeatedly, staring back at their daughter, her chest heaving with sobs she tried desperately to suppress. Every second felt like an eternity, every breath labored, as though the air itself had turned thick and suffocating. At the hospital, chaos erupted around them. Bright lights blinded them, doctors shouted orders, and nurses hurried past with clipboards and medical equipment. Gavin held Aa tightly, rocking her gently as they bombarded him with questions. But his voice failed him, fear had stolen his ability to speak. Isabel stepped in, her words tumbling out in a frantic rush, like water spilling over the edge of a dam. Hours dragged by. Gavin paced outside the room where Aa lay motionless on a hospital bed, surrounded by machines that beeped and whirred ominously. Wires snaked across her small body, monitoring every heartbeat, every breath. Each time he peeked inside, his stomach churned. How could this be happening? Finally, a doctor emerged, her expression unreadable. Gavin grabbed Isabel's hand, squeezing it so tightly his knuckles turned white. Maybe holding onto her would somehow anchor them both to reality. "I'm afraid it's serious," the doctor began softly, pausing as if searching for the right words. "We found a tumor in Aa's brain. It's called DIPG." Isabel gasped, her grip on Gavin's hand tightening painfully. "No," she choked out, her voice breaking. "That can't be true. She's only 6. There has to be medicine, surgery, something." The doctor shook her head sadly. "DIPG is very aggressive. It grows in a part of the brain we can't operate on. I'm so sorry, but there's nothing we can do to stop it. She might have 5 months, maybe a little more." Isabel staggered backward, clutching her chest as if she'd been struck. Her breathing grew ragged, uneven. Gavin stood frozen, unable to move, unable to process what he'd just heard. It felt like the ground had been ripped out from beneath him, leaving only emptiness. "There's nothing we can do," Gavin echoed hollowly, the words tasting bitter on his tongue. The doctor's face softened with sorrow. "We can't cure it, but we'll do everything we can to make her comfortable." "Comfortable?" Isabel repeated, her voice rising sharply. "She's 6. I don't want her to be comfortable, I want her to be healthy. I want her to live." Gavin pulled Isabel into a tight embrace as she sobbed into his chest, her fists pounding weakly against him. "It's not fair," she wailed. "She was supposed to grow up. She was supposed to have a life." He held her tighter, tears streaming down his own face. Neither of them knew how they would survive this nightmare. And then, an even darker thought crept into their minds: should they tell AA? If they told her, they would take away her joy, her innocence. She would stop believing in magic, stop smiling. Gavin shook his head firmly. "I can't tell her, Isabel," he whispered. "I can't take away her happiness. Not yet." Isabel wiped her tears and nodded reluctantly. "Maybe we can keep her happy. Let her enjoy whatever time she has left." They stayed in the hospital room, watching over their little girl as she slept peacefully, her small chest rising and falling with each fragile breath. Gavin and Isabel held hands, silently vowing to protect her happiness for as long as possible. In the days that followed, they did everything they could to maintain a sense of normalcy. AA's room became a haven of color and laughter, filled with her favorite toys, crayons, and picture books. Isabel brought her special snacks, and Gavin read her stories every night, his voice steady despite the storm raging inside him. They poured every ounce of love they had into creating moments of joy, even as their hearts ached with the knowledge of what lay ahead. But one night, AA woke up and heard her parents talking just outside her door. Curious, she slipped out of bed and tiptoed closer, pressing herself against the wall to listen. "How are we supposed to keep doing this?" Isabel asked, her voice trembling. "How do we act like everything's okay when it's not?" AA froze, her brow furrowing in confusion. Something about their tone made her feel uneasy, like a shadow creeping into the edges of her perfect little world. For the first time, she wondered if there was something they weren't telling her, and whether she really wanted to know. "Ask, explain."